The first human being woke up already holding a shovel. No one introduced themselves. No one explained what was happening. There was just the flat land, the river in the distance, the gray morning light, and the weight of a tool in hands that had never held anything before. And somehow, the hands already knew what to do with it. That's the part that gets me. Not the waking up, not even the shovel. The fact that the knowing was already there, built in, like the body had been given its instructions before the mind arrived to ask any questions. Tonight, we're going to stay with that. We're going to go back to the very beginning. Not the beginning of kings or cities or wars. The beginning of the human being. The first morning, what it felt like. What was waiting. You don't need to follow closely. You don't need to remember any of it. Just let it move past you, the way water moves past you when you're standing in a slow river. Let it be something that happens while you rest. Get comfortable. Let your body get heavy. Let today go. We're going a long way back. The land between the two rivers. That's where it starts. Southern Mesopotamia, what we now call Iraq. 4,000 years ago, maybe more. A flat plain so wide and so empty that the horizon seems too far away to be real. No mountains, no forests, just dark soil and slow water and a sky that goes all the way to the edge of everything. In the mornings, the air is cool, damp. It smells like river mud and reeds and turned earth, the kind of smell you don't notice after a while. But on the first morning, you notice everything. The canal is already there, long and straight and deep, running from the river toward fields that are still dark in the early light. The walls of it are packed tight. The angles are exact. Someone built this. Someone spent a very long time digging this channel through the earth so that water could move from where it was to where it was needed. But the canal isn't finished. Up ahead, maybe 100 steps, the neat walls just stop. The earth opens up rough and uneven. Tools marks are still fresh in the soil. Whoever was here last left in the middle of the job. And now you're here, and the fields are still waiting. So you dig. You don't think about why at first. The body doesn't ask why. The body just moves, stroke after stroke. The rhythm of it comes naturally, like breathing, like the beat of your own heart. You settle into it the way you settle into any repetitive thing. The first few minutes are conscious, and then you're somewhere else, and the hands just continue. The sun comes up slowly. It always comes up slowly here, pulling itself over the flat horizon without any drama. Just light getting gradually less gray. Around you, others are working too. You don't know their names. They don't know yours. No one talks much. There's just the sound of tools and earth and water moving in the channel and the birds in the reeds. This is the world. This is all of it. At least, this is all of it that you can see from where you're standing. And for a while, it's enough. But at some point during that first morning, maybe when the sun gets high enough to make you stop and straighten up and press your hand into the small of your back, you look at the finished part of the canal, the old part, the part that was here before you, and you notice something. The work is different. The walls on the old section are smoother than anything you could make. The channel is deeper. The angles where the water turns are so precisely cut, they look less like digging and more like nature. Like the water just always flowed that way. Whoever built this section was not like you. Whoever built this was something else entirely. You stand there for a moment, hand on your back, looking at work that is better than anything you will ever do. Then you go back to digging because the canal still needs finishing and the fields are still waiting, and no one is going to tell you to stop. By midday, you've learned a few things. The canal runs east. You work the section closest to the river. The man to your left works faster than you, but takes longer breaks. The man to your right never takes breaks at all. No one has explained any of this. You just watched and understood and adjusted. This is how you're going to learn everything. By watching, by adjusting, by figuring out the rules of the place from the consequences of breaking them. The heat arrives like a hand pressing down on your shoulders. The air stops moving. The mud at the bottom of the canal starts to smell stronger. Something between river and rot. Not unpleasant exactly, just very present. You slow down. Everyone slows down. The tools keep moving, but the rhythm drops, becomes looser, more patient. The body knows how to negotiate with heat too. You didn't have to be taught that either. Somewhere past midday, someone brings water, a clay jar, passed from hand to hand. You drink and pass it on. The water is cool in a way that feels almost impossible given how hot everything else is. You hold the taste of it in your mouth for a moment before swallowing. That small thing, the cool water, the pause, the shade of a reed canopy someone has rigged over the bank, that small thing feels enormous. Maybe that's the first lesson. Small things feel enormous when you've been working since dawn. There is a building at the edge of the plain. You can see it from the canal. It's been visible all morning, sitting at the boundary between the fields and the sky. A stepped structure, wide at the base, narrowing as it rises, each level set back from the one below it like a giant staircase, made for someone much larger than you. It's the tallest thing in this flat world. From the canal bank, it looks like a mountain. Except no mountain was ever this precise, this deliberate. Every angle is clean. Every surface is smooth. You learn its name before you learn anything else about this place. The temple. Not a temple. The temple. There is no confusion about which one. There is only one thing worth pointing to. When someone says that word, you watch it during the water break. A line of people moving up the wide steps at the front, slowly, in order, carrying things, bundles of grain, jars of oil, bread, you think, though you're too far away to be certain. They go up. They don't come back down while you're watching. The building swallows them and continues to sit there, enormous and patient, against the white sky. Someone beside you notices you looking. He doesn't explain the temple, he just nods at it, and then nods at the canal, and then shrugs. The gesture is very clear. It means same thing. It means this is all connected. It means the canal feeds the fields feed the grain goes up those steps, and that is the shape of the world from where we're standing. You go back to digging, but you keep thinking about the steps. The evening is different from the morning. The heat breaks maybe an hour before the sun goes down. It doesn't fade gradually. It lifts almost suddenly, and the air comes back, and the smell of the river comes with it, and everything that was heavy becomes lighter. People straighten up. Someone laughs at something, the first sound other than work you've heard all day. A dog appears from nowhere and trots along the canal bank with enormous confidence, as if it has been waiting all day for the temperature to become acceptable. The light goes orange, then gold, then the kind of deep amber that makes even flat, muddy land look like it means something. You stop. Everyone stops. There's no signal, no bell, no voice, no instruction. The work just ends the way sleep ends. The moment the body decides it's done. Tools go down. People turn toward the settlement, a cluster of low buildings maybe half a mile from the canal, pressed close together the way things press together when the world outside them is very large. You walk with the others, no one talks much. The tiredness is the kind that lives below the surface, the kind that doesn't announce itself but just changes the weight of every step. Not painful, not unbearable, just present, just the cost of the day, collected at the end. The settlement smells like cooking fires and animals, and dung fuel burning low. Children are running in the narrow space between the buildings, doing the chaotic, purposeless running that children do everywhere in every century, completely immune to the tiredness of the people around them. A woman is grinding grain on a flat stone outside a doorway, pushing and pulling in a steady rhythm, the same rhythm as digging, as rowing, as breathing, the same rhythm that seems to run under everything here, the heartbeat of the whole place. You find a spot near one of the fires. You sit down. Your hands are still curved from holding the tool. It takes a moment before they flatten out, before the muscles understand that holding is over for today. You look at your palms. The skin is already different, slightly rougher at the base of each finger, the beginning of something that will build and build until the hands are barely recognizable as hands anymore, until they are more tool than flesh. You're not upset by this. You note it the way you note everything, with the quiet attention of someone who is still learning the terms of the place. Above you, the stars are arriving, one by one, in the darkening sky. In this flat world, under a sky this wide, there are more stars than sky. They fill it completely. They have names, or they will have names, once enough mornings have passed that people start to feel ownership over things, start to feel that things deserve names. Right now, they're just light, just very distant, very indifferent, very beautiful light. You're tired in a way you've never been tired before, which means you've never been tired before, because this is the first day. You lie back. The ground is still warm from the sun. The fire is close enough to feel without being hot enough to bother. Someone nearby is already asleep. You can hear it in the breathing, slow and even, and fully surrendered. Another lesson the body teaches without being asked: how to let go at the end of a day, how to stop carrying it, how to close the day the way you close a hand around something, and then open the hand and let the thing fall. The stars don't move, or they move too slowly to notice. The canal is out there in the dark, holding its water, doing what canals do in the night, being still, being present, waiting for morning, the way everything waits for morning. You sleep. The second morning is easier, not because anything has changed. The canal is the same. The heat will arrive at the same time. The tools wait in the same place you left them. But the body has updated itself overnight, made the small internal adjustments that bodies make when they are learning a new physical language. The muscles that screamed quietly on the first evening are simply present now, noted, accounted for, ready to be used again. This is the thing about the body. It adapts without asking permission. It decides what the new normal is and moves toward it, regardless of whether the mind has weighed in on the matter. You pick up the tool. You find your place on the canal bank. You begin. By the third morning, it's routine. By the fifth morning, you stop counting mornings. The temple is closer than it looked from the canal. You learn this on the seventh day, or what feels like the seventh day, though you have no word for seven yet. No reliable system for counting days that doesn't involve marking mud with a stick and then losing track of the mud. What you know is that enough days have passed for the temple to feel less foreign. Still enormous, still impossible, but familiar in the way that enormous, impossible things become familiar when you see them every morning against the same sky. A group of you are sent there to carry grain. This is not explained as an honor or a duty or a religious obligation. It's just what's happening today. Someone with authority? You're beginning to understand who has authority by watching where eyes go when decisions are being made. Someone with authority points at the sacks of grain and points at the temple and points at you and 2 others. That's the entire instruction. You carry the grain. The path to the temple is worn smooth by years of feet, thousands of feet, maybe more, all walking the same line between the settlement and the steps, wearing the earth down to something almost polished. You follow it. The sack on your shoulder is heavy and shifts when you walk, finding its own balance against your body the way heavy things do. As you get closer, the temple stops being a shape on the horizon and becomes a thing with texture. The bricks are visible now, each one exactly the same size as all the others, pressed from the same dark clay, baked in the same fire. The courses of bricks are perfectly even. The corners are perfectly square. This is not the kind of building that happens by accident. Someone designed this. Someone organized many people over a long time to make it exactly this way. You stop at the base of the steps and look up. The steps are wide. Each one is about knee height. From here, the top is not visible. The angle is too steep, the sky too bright behind it. You just see the steps rising and then disappearing into light. One of the priests is waiting at the top. You can tell he's a priest by the linen. Everyone else in this world wears rough cloth, functional, durable, the color of undyed fiber. The priest wears something else, finer, whiter, a white that has required considerable effort to achieve in a world that is mostly the color of mud. He's also wearing something at his neck, a small clay figure, or maybe stone, something that catches the light when he moves. He doesn't come down to meet you. You go up 37 steps. You count them on the way up. You're not sure why. It just seems important to know. At the top, you set the grain down where the priest indicates. A large courtyard opens up behind him, much bigger than you expected from below. Stone flagged, clean. The kind of clean that means someone sweeps it every day without fail. On the far side of the courtyard, there's a doorway, and beyond the doorway, visible through the dark opening, the glow of small oil lamps arranged in rows. You don't go through the doorway. That's very clear without anyone saying so. The priest inspects the grain. He doesn't thank you. He doesn't acknowledge you in any way that contains information about how he feels about your presence. He looks at the grain. Then he makes a small mark on a clay tablet with a stylus. Then he looks at the next sack. You are already on your way back down the steps before he finishes writing. There are things you learn about the temple in the weeks that follow, not because anyone explains them, because you watch and you listen and you put things together. The temple is not just a building. It is the center of everything. The grain that goes up those steps comes back down in the form of rations, measured, organized, distributed to the workers according to a system that the priests track on their clay tablets. The canal you dig feeds the fields. The fields produce the grain. The grain goes to the temple. The temple gives back what people need to survive. The system is circular and total, and you are inside it the way water is inside a canal. You are not separate from it. You are part of its movement. The gods live in the temple. You understand this more as feeling than as fact. The way the priests move near the inner doorway, the way the lamp flames are tended, with the kind of attention you give to something alive. The way the whole building, even from the outside, even from the canal bank a mile away, seems to be doing something. Not standing still, the way ordinary buildings stand still, but attending to something invisible, conducting some ongoing and necessary business with the sky. The gods needed feeding. This is one of the first things you learn that arrives as actual information, spoken in actual words by a person sitting beside you at the fire one evening. An older man, older than most, with hands so altered by work that they look geological, like something formed by pressure over centuries. He tells you in the straightforward way that people share information when they assume you already know most of it. The gods built all of this, the canals, the fields, the whole arrangement. They built it, and then they were tired, so they made us to keep it running. And in exchange for keeping it running, we eat, we sleep, we continue, and the gods continue too, because we feed them. And if we stop feeding them, he pauses here, looks into the fire, looks back at you. If we stop, then everything stops. He says it simply, not as a threat or a warning, just as the explanation for how the world works. You eat in exchange for working. The gods get fed in exchange for existing. The canal gets extended in exchange for the water it carries. Everything is exchange. Everything has its price and its return. You sit with this for a while. The fire pops. The night insects do their thing. You think, so someone was tired? And then I appeared, and the old man, who has not heard your thought, says, get some sleep. The canal doesn't care what you were thinking about. Weeks pass, then more weeks. The rhythm of it takes over completely. You stop being someone who is new to this and become simply someone who does this. The canal grows. The section you work on has progressed far enough that you can no longer see the starting point from where you're digging. Behind you, the old work. In front, the new. You are always at the edge of what has been done, pushing it a little further each day. There's a satisfaction in this that you didn't expect. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter and more durable. The satisfaction of visible progress, of the edge moving, of knowing that yesterday you were here and today you were there, and tomorrow you will be slightly further on. It's small, but it's real. And real small things turn out to be worth more than imagined large ones. The man to your left is named something that sounds like Nama when people say it. Though names are still slippery things to you. You know them when you hear them, but they don't quite stick yet. As if the part of you that holds names is still being built. He digs fast and takes long breaks. And during his breaks, he talks about the weather, about the grain rations, about a woman in the settlement who makes bread that he considers the best bread that has ever existed, though he allows that he has not traveled enough to be certain of this. He never talks about the gods. When you ask him once, directly, why did they leave? Why did they stop building and hand it to us? He looks at you with an expression that contains mild surprise and then mild something else. Something harder to name. Not quite pity. Not quite a look that says, that's not really a question people ask. Then he picks up his tool and goes back to the canal. The first time you go inside the temple is an accident. Not the main chamber, not the inner room with the lamps. A storeroom off to the side of the courtyard where sacks of grain are kept in organized rows and the air is cool and dry in the way that carefully managed spaces are cool and dry. You're sent to get something, a specific tool that was left here by someone who should have brought it back and didn't. You find it, you're on your way out, and then you stop. Because on the wall of the storeroom, pressed into the plaster before it dried, there are marks. Small marks, careful marks, made with the same kind of stylus the priests use on their tablets. They cover most of one wall, a long series of wedge shapes and lines and angles, row after row, starting near the top and working down. You stand and look at them. You don't know what they say. The system of marks that turns sound into shape is not something anyone has taught you, but you know what they are. You know they mean something. You know that someone stood in this room at some point and pressed meaning into the wall, and that the meaning is still here, patient and intact, waiting to be read by someone who knows how. You reach out and touch one of the marks. The plaster is cold. The mark is clean-edged, precise. What does it say? You'll never know. There's no one to ask and no way to find out. And the tool is waiting, and the priest will notice you've been gone too long. You take your hand off the wall. You pick up the tool. You walk back out into the bright courtyard and down the 37 steps and back along the worn path toward the canal. But the marks stay with you. The idea that someone was here and left something behind, that the something survived, that it's still speaking after all this time to anyone who might be able to hear it. You find yourself thinking, I want to do that. I want to leave something that stays. The thought surprises you. It's the first thing you've wanted that isn't food or water or rest. You're not sure what to do with it. The season changes. You know this not from any internal calendar, but from the way the light changes, the angle of it, the color, the way it hits the water in the canal differently in the late afternoon. The air changes too, still hot, but less absolute about it. There's a quality of negotiation in the heat now, a sense that it knows its time is shortening. The flooding season is coming. This information arrives the way most information arrives, sideways, embedded in other conversations, assembled from pieces. The river rises every year. It has always risen. It will rise again. When it does, the canal system becomes both more important and more dangerous. More important because the rising water needs to be directed, managed, kept from destroying the fields. More dangerous because a canal wall that wasn't maintained precisely enough will give way under the pressure, and everything behind it will flood. The work changes, becomes more urgent without anyone announcing it as urgent. The pace quickens slightly. The older workers start checking the walls more frequently, pressing their hands against the packed earth, watching for the small signs. A hairline crack in the facing, a slight dampness where there should be none, a subsidence at the top of the bank so small you'd miss it if you didn't know to look. You learn to look. The night before the flood season is a night the whole settlement stays awake. No one says this is the plan, but when you step outside as the sun goes down and see that all the fires are burning higher than usual, that people are sitting in circles rather than lying down, that the old man with the geological hands is moving from group to group saying something you can't quite hear. You understand that this is not a sleeping night. You sit with others near the largest fire. The conversation moves around the fire, around the circle, touching many things and returning to the same few. The river, the gods, what a good flood means. Enough to enrich the soil, not so much that everything drowns. The difference between a year when the grain comes up strong and a year when it comes up thin, and what that difference means for everyone who ate from those fields. An older woman is talking. Her voice is steady and low and the circle is quiet while she speaks, which means she's someone worth listening to. She's talking about an ancestor, or a story about an ancestor, or a story that someone told her about someone who might have been an ancestor. The boundaries are not sharp. She says, there was a man who asked the temple priests why the gods created us, not out of anger, just out of wanting to know, just out of being curious. She pauses. The fire pops. She says, the priest thought about it for a while. And then he said something like, the gods were here first. They built everything. And the building was too much work, too much for beings of their nature to sustain. So they found a solution. And the solution was a body that could work without knowing why it was working. A body that would just do it. Digging and planting and carrying and feeding and building. Because that's what bodies do. That's what we were made for. She pauses again. She says, the man who asked thought about this for a while, and then he said, so we're a solution to a problem we didn't create. The priest said yes. The man said, does that bother them? The gods? That we're just a fix for a situation they made? And the priest said, they don't think about it that way. They don't need to. The problem is solved. The canal gets dug. That's what matters to them. She stops talking. The fire continues. Someone on the other side of the circle says, that's a sad story. She says, I don't know if it's sad. I think it might just be true. The river sounds different that night, fuller, heavier, moving with a new purpose toward the fields and the canals and the walls that have been packed and repaired and worried over for months. You lie back and look at the sky. Same stars, same in different light. You think about the marks on the wall of the storeroom. You think about being a solution to a problem you didn't create. You think, but the canal is real. The water in it is real. The fields it feeds are real. The bread from those fields is real. The cool water in the clay jar at midday, that's real. Whatever the reason for all this, whatever was tired, whatever decided that a body with hands and no questions was the answer to the problem, the canal is still real. That has to mean something, doesn't it? You're not sure, but the thought of it is enough to hold. While the night moves slowly toward morning, the flood comes. It comes at night, the way difficult things often come, while you're asleep, while your attention is elsewhere, while the world outside the fire circle is doing things without your participation. You wake to the sound of it, not a crash, not a disaster, but something deeper and more patient than that. The sound of a very large amount of water moving at a slightly different pace than it was moving yesterday. You go to the canal. In the dark, in the light of torches, the canal walls are holding, but the water is higher. The surface, which was 2 feet below the top of the bank yesterday, is 6 inches below it now, and rising slowly, without hurry. The river does not hurry. The river has all the time there is. Everyone is there. Every person who works the canal, and some who don't. Children, old people, the woman who makes the bread, the priest who marked your grain sack on the day you carried it up the steps. Everyone. The walls are checked. The weak points are shored up with packed mud and reeds pressed together into something like mortar. Hands in the dark, working fast, working without instruction, because everyone knows what needs doing. There's something strange about this moment. The strangeness is that you don't feel like a solution to someone else's problem. You feel like someone who is protecting something. It's a small distinction. Maybe it doesn't matter. But you notice it. Your hands are in the mud, and the water is rising, and the torchlight makes everyone's faces orange and alive. And you are not thinking about gods or tiredness or why any of this exists. You are thinking, hold, just hold, let this hold. And it does. By dawn, the water has leveled off. The banks are intact. The canal is full, deeper than it's ever been. The water almost to the top, carrying the brown silt of the upland plains it came from, the mineral richness of everything it collected on its way here. This water is the reason the grain grows. This water is the reason the bread exists. This water is the reason the settlement is here at all. You stand on the bank in the early morning light and look at it. Full, heavy, moving, real. The weeks after the flood are different. The fields absorb the silt. The grain is planted. The labor shifts from digging and maintaining to planting and watching. You learn the difference between a seedling that is going to make it and one that isn't. Something the experienced farmers communicate through small gestures, small sounds, an almost imperceptible tilt of the head that means, that one's fine, leave it, but that one needs attention. The season moves. There are days when the work is lighter, when the canal doesn't need anything, and the fields just need to be watched, and the heat isn't yet back to its full summer weight. On those days, the pace slows, and there's space for other things. You go back to the storeroom. The marks are still there. You bring a piece of clay the next time. Soft, flat, workable. You sit outside the storeroom in the corner of the courtyard where the shade is deepest in the afternoon. You look at the marks on the wall. You try to copy one. The result is nothing like the original. Your mark is crooked, too deep in some places, too shallow in others. The wedge shape that the priests make in one clean movement takes you 4 attempts to get even approximately right. But approximately right exists. The mark is there, in the clay, made by you. You look at it for a long time. This is the thing you wanted, not to understand the marks, not yet, just to make one, to be someone who can take a soft surface and leave something in it that wasn't there before. You press the clay into the wall beside the storeroom door, low down, near the ground, where no one will look. You smooth it with your thumb so it blends with the surface. But the mark is still there, underneath the smoothing, pressed in, permanent. Later that day, the old man with the geological hands walks past and looks at you. He says, "What are you doing?" You say, "Nothing." He says, "All right," and walks on. The year turns. The flood recedes. The grain grows. The harvest comes, a good one, the kind that makes the older people in the settlement look at each other in a particular way with a relief so deep it's almost indistinguishable from sadness. As if good years are almost harder to trust than bad ones. The grain goes up the steps. The rations come back down. The canal gets extended another 50 feet. The marks on the wall of the storeroom survive the season undisturbed. And in you, something has shifted. Not dramatically, not in any way that you could point to and name clearly. But there's a difference between the body that woke up holding a shovel on the first morning and the body that stands at the canal bank now in the long amber light of late afternoon. The first body was waiting to be told what it was for. This body has started to have opinions about the matter. There is a conversation you have one evening with a woman who works the far end of the canal. You've seen her for months without exchanging more than a glance. She is efficient and quick and tends to keep to herself the way certain people tend to keep to themselves. Not out of hostility, but out of a kind of self-sufficiency that makes company feel less necessary. But on this particular evening, the light is doing something strange over the fields. A low cloud catching the last of the sun and turning the whole western sky a deep, impossible orange. And you are both standing still, watching it. And the standing still together makes conversation natural in the way that shared attention sometimes does. She says, without preamble, "Do you ever wonder if they're watching?" You don't have to ask who she means. You say, "Sometimes." She says, "I used to. I don't anymore." You say, "Why not?" She says, "Because it doesn't change anything. Whether they're watching or not, the canal needs digging. Whether they care or not, the flood comes." I decided it was a question I could put down. She looks at the sky a little longer. She says, "I think the question was making me tired in a way the work wasn't. The work is just the body. The question was something else. Heavier. You think about this? You say, but doesn't it matter if the whole reason we're here is just because someone needed labor? Doesn't that mean something?" She's quiet for a moment. Then she says, "I think maybe the reason something starts doesn't have to be the reason it continues." The sky finishes its business with the orange light and moves on to something more ordinary. She picks up her tool and walks back toward the settlement. You stay at the canal for a while longer. The reason something starts doesn't have to be the reason it continues. You turn the sentence over the way you turn a tool in your hands when you're getting the grip right. Testing the weight of it, feeling where the balance is. Winter in this part of the world is not what you might imagine. No snow. The temperature drops, but does not become brutal. The nights are cold enough that you sleep pressed close to others, and the fire is kept going until morning. The days are short. The sun does its work quickly and without commitment, making its low arc across the sky and disappearing before you're ready for it to. The canal work slows because there's less to do, or what there is to do requires fewer hands. Some days, you're not sent to the canal at all. Those days are strange. The body, accustomed to the canal's demands, doesn't know what to do with emptiness. You find yourself walking to the canal anyway, and standing at the bank and looking at the water level without being required to look at it. The man who digs fast and takes long breaks, Nama, finds this funny. He spends his free days eating and sleeping, and he doesn't understand why you would stand at a canal unless someone was making you. You can't explain it exactly. There's something about the canal that has become not yours, not in any official sense, not in any sense the priests would recognize on their tablets, but personally significant. You dug part of it. You shored up the walls when the flood came. You have stood on its bank in enough different kinds of light that you know how it looks in all of them. That adds up to something. You're not sure what to call it, but it adds up. The priests change. This is the thing that cracks the season open. You don't notice at first. The priest who inspects the grain sacks at the top of the steps, the one in fine linen with the clay figure at his neck, is simply not there one morning. When you make the carry, a different man is in his place. Older, moving with the careful deliberation of someone whose joints have registered their objections. He looks at the grain. He makes the mark on the tablet. The same process. Different hands. You ask Nama that evening, "What happened to the other one?" He shrugs. He says, "They come and go." You say, "Where do they come from?" He says, "The temple. They're temple people." You say, "And when they leave?" He says, "Back to the temple." Or dead, usually dead actually. They work until they can't, and then they die, and someone else does the work, same as us. He says this without any particular sadness, just information. But it stays with you. The priest in fine linen, making his careful marks serving the gods who live in the inner room, doing something that seemed, from the outside, like participation in something permanent, something that would always be there, and then simply not being there anymore. The marks on his tablet continue without him. The linen goes to someone else. The gods in the inner room presumably continue their business without registering the change in who is bringing the oil. This is the first time the system shows you its indifference. Not dramatically, not with any announcement, just the priest is different now, and the grain still goes up the steps, and the canal still needs maintaining, and the world continues in exactly the way it was continuing before. The following season, the flood is early. This matters. The canal system is designed around a specific schedule, a rough prediction built from generations of watching the river, of when the water will rise and how fast and how far. When the flood comes early, it finds the preparations incomplete. The weak sections haven't all been reinforced. The additional channels that redirect excess water haven't all been cleared from last season's silt. 3 days of frantic work follow, hands in mud around the clock, the torches burning all night, the water rising faster than it should. A section of the east bank fails, quietly, almost apologetically, a long vertical crack appearing in the packed earth and then slowly widening as the water pressure finds it and tests it and decides it doesn't need to respect it. The water goes where it was not supposed to go. A field is flooded, not destroyed. The silt deposit will actually improve the soil for next year, but the current year's planting is lost in that section. The calculation of grain against labor, against mouths, against rations shifts accordingly. You watch the priests on the steps. The head priest, a man you've never seen at the top before, more senior than the ones you usually deal with, wearing the kind of linen that makes the regular priest's linen look rough by comparison, stands in the courtyard with several of his subordinates around him. They are looking at the fields, talking quietly. You can't hear what they say, but you can see that they are not panicking. They are adjusting, making notes on tablets, recalculating. The gods were consulted, you learn later. The omens were read, oil poured on water, and the patterns interpreted, a sheep's liver examined for signs. The gods indicated something. You never find out what. What you find out is this: the rations are reduced. Not by much, enough to be felt, not enough to cause serious hardship. A smaller portion of grain, a pause in some of the additional provisions that had been distributed in better seasons. The canal workers absorb this information without drama. Nama says, "This is just how it is." Some years, and the older woman who made the speech about the gods making us to do the work they were tired of, she says, the gods didn't promise comfort. They promised continuation, and we're continuing. She says it as if this is enough. You think about it for a long time. You think, is continuation enough? You think some days it is. Some days the canal is full and the light is right and the bread is warm. And continuation is everything you could want. You think other days it isn't. And you think maybe the honest answer is that it varies, that there is no stable position on the question, that the meaning of it shifts with the season, with the bread, with the quality of the light, with how much your back hurts, with whether someone laughed at something today and whether you were there to hear it. Maybe this is what the Sumerians understood that took everyone else another 1,000 years to figure out, that the question of whether life is worth living doesn't have one answer. It has today's answer, and today's answer might be different from tomorrow's. And that's not a failure of the question or the life. That's just how it actually is. There are nights when the temple fires are visible from the settlement. They burn on a schedule you learn to read without thinking about it. Certain configurations mean certain things, the way weather reads to someone who has lived in a place long enough. 2 large fires in the main courtyard means a significant ritual. The smaller sustained flame at the top of the ziggurat, the one that burns every night, is the god's presence. Or what stands in for the god's presence when the god is otherwise occupied, which seems to be most of the time. You sit with others and watch the fires. Sometimes there's a particular man in the settlement, not a priest, not a canal worker, something in between, a kind of attendant who moves goods between the canal and the temple storehouse, who knows more about the inner workings of the temple than most people. His name resolves itself over time into something you can hold, though names in this world are still strange to you, still feel like labels pressed onto things rather than things themselves. He says one evening that the gods have personal preferences. This is new information. You had understood the gods as forces, enormous, indifferent, architectural in their scope. The idea of them having preferences implies a scale that is somehow both larger and smaller than the one you had constructed. He says, Nana, the moon god, likes milk, specifically goat milk, offered at specific intervals during the lunar cycle. If the milk isn't right, the right temperature, the right vessel, the right timing, the omens shift. Things get harder to read. You say, the god can tell if the milk is the wrong temperature? He says, the god knows everything about this city, every field, every canal, every person. That's what it means to be the patron god. Everything that happens here is happening inside the god's awareness. You say, and the god allows the section of the east bank to fail? He's quiet for a moment. He says, the god allows a lot of things. You say, why? He says, I don't know. That's not a question I'm equipped to answer. I just make sure the milk is the right temperature. He says it without bitterness, without irony, as if this is simply a reasonable division of responsibility. He manages the milk, but God manages the reasons. And the arrangement requires no further examination. But in the dark, long after the conversation, you keep returning to it. The God allows a lot of things. The field that flooded, the rations that shrank, the priest who stopped appearing at the top of the steps, the shovel in your hands on the first morning, already waiting, with no explanation attached. The God allows all of this. And the God, presumably, also allows the orange light over the fields in the evening, and the cool water in the clay jar, and the sound of the canal moving at night, and the moment when Nama laughs at something, and it's actually funny. The God allows all of it with the same consistency of permission, indiscriminate, total. This is not a God who rewards. This is not a God who punishes. This is a God who contains, who is in some sense the fact that all of this is happening at all. The palace and the storeroom and the canal and the flood and the bread and the death of the priest and the marks on the storeroom wall. All of it inside the same enormous, indifferent awareness. You think, I don't know if this is comforting or not. You think, I'm not sure it's required to be either. Years pass. You stop noticing them as years. They pass as seasons, as flood cycles, as lengths of canal finished and extended, as gradations of roughness in the skin of your hands. The settlement changes slowly. New buildings go up, old ones develop cracks that get patched and repatched until the patching is essentially the building. Children grow. The children of the people you first worked alongside become workers themselves, taking up tools with a naturalness that you find now quietly astonishing. They have never asked the question you asked. They have never needed to wonder what they are for. The canal was already there when they arrived. The temple was already there. The pattern was already set. They stepped into it the way you step into a current, and the current carries them, and they don't feel the carrying because they've never not been carried. You try sometimes to remember the first morning, the gray light, the tool already in your hands, the canal stretching in both directions. Without explanation, the memory is there, but it's changed in quality. It doesn't feel like something that happened to you the way the flood felt like something that happened to you. It feels more like a story someone told you about someone who might have been you. Maybe that's what memory does with the most fundamental things, makes them into stories, puts them at a slight distance so that you can keep walking toward the canal every morning without being stopped in your tracks by the strangeness of the fact that you are walking toward the canal every morning. The last time you go into the storeroom, the mark you pressed into the wall is gone. Not removed, not deliberately erased. The wall was replastered at some point during the harvest season. You saw the work crew doing it, a practical maintenance task, covering the old surface with new clay. The marks on the wall, the ones you were never able to read, are also gone. Everything that was pressed into the previous surface is now sealed underneath the new one. Your mark is in there somewhere, underneath the fresh plaster, permanently part of the wall now, invisible but present. You press your hand flat against the new surface, cold, smooth, saying nothing. You hold your hand there for a moment. Then you go back down the steps and along the worn path toward the canal. There is a night near the end of a flood season, a late night, the kind that arrives in the small hours when the fires have burned down and only the most stubborn insomniacs are still awake. When you sit at the canal bank alone, the water is high, still retreating from the seasonal peak, but full and slow and carrying that particular weight of silt-heavy river water that makes it look almost solid in the dark. The moon is up, the moon that belongs to Nana, that is Nana, or that Nana moves through, or that is the expression of Nana's attention turned toward this flat plain. The moon is up and the canal surface catches it and returns a pale, flat light that goes out in both directions along the channel as far as you can see. You think about the first morning. You think about the marks on the wall, sealed now into the plaster. You think about the woman who said, "The reason something starts doesn't have to be the reason it continues." You think about Nama, who digs fast and takes long breaks and thinks about bread and has never once appeared to wonder what he is for, and genuinely seems, fine. You think about the old man with the geological hands who explained the exchange. Work for food, food for work, gods fed, canals dug, world continues, with the calm of someone who has made peace with a fact by simply looking at it directly until it became ordinary. You think, what does it mean to be made for a purpose? And the answer that comes back in the quiet with the canal moving in the dark beside you is not what you expected. It means a start, a direction, a first shape pressed into the clay. It doesn't mean a limit. The body that was made to dig canals also noticed the marks on the wall and wanted to copy them. Also watched the orange sky over the fields and felt something that digging doesn't explain. Also stayed awake in the middle of the night to sit beside the water and ask questions that no one required it to ask. The function is real. You do dig the canal. The canal does need digging. The world does require this labor, and the labor is genuinely yours to give. But the function is not the whole of it. It was the beginning. It is not the definition. You don't know if the gods understand this. You don't know if it matters to them, the ones who needed labor, who solved the problem, who handed you the shovel in the gray light of the first morning without explanation. Maybe it doesn't occur to them. Maybe the distinction between what a thing is made for and what a thing becomes is not a distinction that interests beings of their nature, but it interests you. And somewhere in that interest, somewhere in the gap between the function you were given and the questions you developed on your own, somewhere in there is the thing that is specifically and irreducibly yours. Not the canal. The canal belongs to everyone who digs it, and to the water in it, and to the fields beyond it, and to the grain, and to the bread, and to the temple, and probably to Nana in some technical theological sense. But the question is yours. No one assigned it. No one required it. No one will mark it on a tablet, or measure it against a ration, or evaluate its contribution to the irrigation system. It just appeared. In a body made of clay and someone else's divine blood, in a world designed for someone else's convenience, on a night when the moon was out and the canal was full, and you had nothing to do but sit there and notice that you were sitting there. The question is yours, and that turns out to be enough. The canal goes on. In the morning it will need checking. The section near the eastern bend accumulates silt faster than the rest, something about the angle of the turn. It will be a long day. The heat is coming back. The work continues. But tonight, the water moves and the moon hangs over the flat plain, and the settlement breathes its slow sleeping breath behind you, and the stars are doing what stars do, which is simply be there, with no instruction and no purpose and no explanation for why they are so much more beautiful than anything that beautiful needs to be. You stay at the canal a little longer, not because anything is going to change, just because you want to. Just because the night is still here, and you are still in it, and the canal is full, and the stars are out, and somewhere under the new plaster on the storeroom wall, your mark is still there, sealed in, permanent, pressed into the clay of a world that did not ask you to make it, but did not stop you either. The water moves. The night continues. You breathe. The city that grows up around the canal is not your doing. You don't build it. You don't plan it. You don't decide where the streets go, or where the new storehouses are placed, or how wide the gaps between buildings should be to let the morning air move through. These decisions happen the way most decisions in this world happen, through accumulation, through the slow pressure of practical necessity, through the fact that certain things work and certain things don't, and the things that work get repeated until they become permanent. But you watch it happen. That's something. More buildings. More people. More children running the same paths between the same walls, wearing new grooves into the earth beside the old grooves. The canal extends further east than you ever dug. There are sections of it now that you've never seen, maintained by hands you don't know, dug in seasons you weren't part of. The canal has outgrown you. This is not a sad thing. You understand this now in a way you couldn't have understood on the first morning. The canal was never really yours to begin with. You were a pair of hands it passed through for a while. A season of maintenance. A length of bank that was packed and checked and extended by your specific body during your specific years, and is now simply part of it, indistinguishable from the rest. Your hands are there, in the walls of the canal, pressed into the mud you packed. They will stay there long after the hands themselves are gone. That's what the marks on the storeroom wall meant, you think. Not a name, not a claim, just the evidence of presence. Just the fact left behind in some permanent medium that something was here and touched this surface and moved on. Nama dies on a warm afternoon in early spring. Not dramatically. He sits down against the canal bank during a break. His long break, the kind you always knew would eventually become permanent. And he doesn't get up. By the time anyone notices, the afternoon has gone deep and orange and quiet, and he is simply sitting there with his head tilted slightly back and his hands open in his lap, the way hands open when they're finally finished with everything they were holding. The settlement gathers that evening. Food is shared. Someone who knew him longer than you talks about what he was like before you arrived. Things you didn't know, a daughter somewhere further east, a particular kind of generosity that expressed itself not in words, but in the quality of his attention. When you were talking, the way he looked at you as if what you were saying was the most reasonable thing in the world, regardless of whether it was. The bread woman is there. She doesn't speak. She just sits near the fire and accepts what's passed to her and is present in the way that certain people are present, solidly, without qualification, as if they have decided that being here is sufficient and are putting their full weight behind that decision. You sit with the evening. You think, he never asked what he was for, and he was something real and specific and gone now. And the canal doesn't know the difference. And Nana, presumably, doesn't know the difference. And tomorrow, the silt will accumulate in the eastern bend exactly as it always does. And that's all true. And it doesn't diminish him. The two things exist at the same time, the indifference of the world and the reality of the person. And they don't resolve into each other. They just both remain true simultaneously, like the canal and the question, like the function and the life that grew around the function. You sit until the fire is low. You go to sleep. The last morning comes the way all mornings come, gradually, without announcement, the light doing its slow work at the eastern horizon, going from nothing to something so incrementally that you can never identify the exact moment it becomes day. You are old now. Your hands look like the old man's hands looked, the one who explained the exchange to you by the fire on that early evening, geological, formed by pressure, the kind of hands that contain their own history, that have stopped being merely hands and become a record of everything they've touched. You walk to the canal, not because you're expected to. You haven't been sent to the canal in some time. The younger workers are faster, and the supervising work that suited your later years has found its own rhythm without you. You walk because it's morning, and this is where you walk in the morning, because the path is worn down to something almost polished, and your feet know it in the dark. The canal is full. The season is right for it, that in-between time, after the flood has settled and before the summer heat arrives and the levels start to drop. The water is the color of pale clay. A bird in the reeds is performing its small repetitive song, the same song, or the song of a bird descended from the one that sang it on the first morning, or simply the same song that birds in reeds have always sung and will continue to sing, regardless of what any particular morning means. To the person standing on the bank, you stand on the bank. The tool is not in your hands today. Your hands are just hands, open, empty, resting at your sides. You look at the water. This is the canal you helped dig. Some of it, a section of it, a length of bank that begins somewhere to the west of where you're standing and ends somewhere to the east. It is part of a system now, connected to other canals, branching into smaller channels, feeding fields that feed more people than you can count. The section you dug is unremarkable within the whole. You couldn't point to it on a map and say, "This part is mine." The joins are invisible, the work is absorbed, but the water is moving through it. Right now, this morning, through the section you packed and extended and repaired and worried over on the night of the early flood, through the walls your hands are pressed into, moving toward the fields, moving toward the grain, moving toward the bread and the ration and the cool water in the clay jar at midday. Real, still real. The morning light spreads across the plain in the particular way it spreads on clear spring days. Not the harsh brightness of summer, not the gray uncertainty of winter, but something generous and unhurried. The fields to the east are green, properly green, the dark green of grain that is going to be fine, that is doing what grain does in good seasons, which is simply grow toward the light without asking anyone's permission. You breathe. The air smells the same as it always smelled. Wet clay, reeds, the mineral sweetness of the riverbed, the smell of a world that has been worked for a very long time. You think about the first morning, the gray light, the shovel already in your hands, the canal already needing continuation, the absence of any explanation for why you were here or what it was supposed to mean. You think, I never got an answer. The gods didn't explain themselves. The priests didn't explain themselves. The canal didn't explain itself. The shovel was just there, and the work was just there, and the years were just there, and then they passed. And here you are on the other side of them, standing at the canal bank in the spring light, with empty hands and the sound of water moving. You think, maybe the answer was always going to be this. Not a reason delivered from above, not a purpose handed down along with the shovel, not a divine explanation that would make all the labor and the flooding and the reduced rations and the loss of people and the inexplicable beauty of the evening light add up to something clean and coherent and satisfying. Just this, the morning, the canal, the green fields, the bird in the reeds, the fact of still being here to see it. Later in the day, someone will ask where you were this morning, and you will say, at the canal. And they will say, of course. And that will be the whole of the conversation. The city will continue. The grain will grow. The temple fires will burn on their schedule. The priests will make their marks on their tablets, and the marks will outlast the priests, and the priests will be replaced, and the tablets will be stored in the cool dark of the archive room. And the archive room will eventually become rubble, and the rubble will become the ground that someone else builds on. The canal will fill with silt eventually. All canals do. The labor of maintaining them always loses. In the end, to the patient accumulation of sediment, the river depositing itself slowly into every space it can find, reclaiming what was dug from it, returning the landscape to something that predates the digging. But not today. Today the canal is full. Today the water moves. Today the fields are green, and the light is right, and the bird in the reeds is singing its small song into a morning that doesn't need it to be singing, but doesn't stop it either. You stand at the bank a little longer, not because you're waiting for anything, not because there's something left to understand, just because the morning is here and you are in it, and the canal is moving at your feet, and the world doesn't owe you this. The warmth, the green fields, the sound of water, the world doesn't owe you any of it. And here it is, anyway. Here it is. The city sleeps eventually. Every city does. The fires burn down. The conversations stop. The children are gathered in from wherever they scattered to and pressed gently towards sleep with the particular patient insistence that children require. The canal workers go home and sit, and then lie down and let the day leave their bodies the way it always leaves, slowly, starting with the hands, moving up through the arms and the shoulders, and finally reaching the face, which holds tension longest, which releases it last. The settlement goes quiet. The fires become coals. The coals become dark. The canal moves in the silence. It always moves in the silence. All night, every night, carrying its pale water from the river toward the fields, doing what it was made to do without anyone watching, without any witness required, without needing the morning to arrive before it continues. The stars come out. There are more of them than the sky has room for, crowding each other, spilling across the dark from one edge of the horizon to the other. They have been doing this every night since before the canal existed, since before the city existed, since before the first morning when someone woke up already holding a shovel in the gray light with no explanation attached. They will continue long after the shovel is gone, long after the canal is silt, long after the marks pressed into the wall of the storeroom are so deep under the accumulated layers of plaster and rubble and time that no instrument will ever find them. The stars don't know about any of this. They're just there. The way the canal is just there, the way you were just there. Present for a while, moving through, leaving the walls slightly more packed than you found them, passing the water along. The night is very still. The city breathes. Somewhere in the reed beds, one last bird makes one last sound. Not the morning song, something shorter, less committed, and then goes quiet. The water moves. The dark holds everything. And slowly, without deciding to, without needing to decide, everything sleeps.